that they are in the holiday spirit as they have now won their 7th of 8 games without Ja Morant. A 126-91 victory, another blowout victory. And the Grizzlies' recipe for success, the method to their madness, is starting to become clear. On a historic night for Dillon Brooks personally, on a historic night for the Memphis Grizzlies as a franchise, and why the Grizzlies bench is helping the Grizzlies get wins now that are really going to pay off for them as they enter a tough part of their schedule over the next 6 weeks. All that and much more on this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Let's get it going.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome once again to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. You can find me at StatsSAC on Twitter. The show at Locked On Grizz. You can find the podcast wherever it's available. Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the Odyssey app, wherever you choose to listen to your podcast. That's where we will be. Make sure you review, subscribe, listen to the show, enjoy it. My name's Shawn Coleman, credentialed media member with the Grizzlies, having covering the Grizzlies now for 4 years. Write about them over at Grizzly Bear Blues, your host here at Locked On Grizzlies, your Grizzlies every day. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Lets others know that you enjoy the show. Lets us know you enjoy the show. Helps others find the show and just makes the overall experience as good as it can be for everybody. Also want to remind you to make Truebill.com something that you certainly look into. Are you tired of those free ads, especially around Christmas time, that you want to check out, but you don't want to have to pay for, but yet they become hidden costs that you have to pay for? Truebill is a great way for you to be able to manage that. It keeps those free trials from turning into unwanted subscriptions, and it's a great way for you to manage your subscriptions overall. Check out Truebill.com today. So a couple of things really stood out about the Grizzlies' victory tonight against the Philadelphia 76ers because of, trends that are starting to, be kind of unique when it comes to the Grizzlies, but also really, really awesome, to be honest with you. For one, this is the 3rd or 4th game in the row where the Grizzlies have had to juggle the statuses of players unexpectedly. We've seen it with Dillon Brooks due to the COVID protocols. We've seen it with Jaren Jackson Jr. due to soreness. And tonight we saw it with Desmond Bane. This is the 3rd or 4th night in a row where within hours of the game starting, the Grizzlies have had to manage the status of a player on an injury report. Now, overall, it's been positive. Like, for instance, last night, despite the fact that, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Steven Adams all were questionable going into the game, all 3 players played. It seemed like, for instance, Steven Adams' injury from this past Saturday, it looked better than expected, and Jaren and Desmond's soreness seemed to not be any big issues at all. So the Grizzlies were able to be more at full strength than they thought they were going to be, while the Philadelphia 76ers unexpectedly were without Joel Embiid. He was announced as a starter, but come game time, he actually did not play due to rib soreness. So the Grizzlies, once again, and again, I think it's relevant, the Grizzlies are certainly having luck missing out on some of their opponents' best talents, but I don't think in any way, shape, or form that should take away just how special the Grizzlies have been in terms of their ability to get wins over the past month or so over the past few weeks without Ja Morant. But while that is a unique trend that the Grizzlies have had to juggle over the past, week or so, another really fun trend to see is that we are clearly starting to see how the Grizzlies are being successful, their recipe for success. And it kind of is in 3 layers. One, of the trio of Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, and Dillon Brooks. On any given game night, 2 of those 3 players stepping up to combine for 40 to 50 points, whether it's Desmond and Jaren, Jaren and Dillon, Dillon and Desmond, whoever it may be, getting 40 to 50 combined points. For instance, 26 points from Dillon last night, 22 from Jaren, 48 combined points. It is such a huge basis for this Grizzlies offense, especially without the engine of their offense in Ja Morant. So that's step 1 to the Grizzlies getting a victory. Step 2, as I mentioned yesterday, is the Grizzlies playing like a top 5 defense. The Grizzlies made a bit of history last night. I'll cover that in just a moment. But the Grizzlies not only playing like a top 5 defense, but along with 2 of the 3 of Desmond, Jaren, and Dillon stepping up to combine 40 or 50 points, the Grizzlies using their defense as a catalyst for their offense to remain productive offensively. That is step 2. But then step 3 is the bench stepping up. And this is a bench that's missing some of its best talents because those talents have had to step into the starting lineup at times to support the starting lineup when players have been out. You're also seeing them without Brandon Clark, Zaire Williams, some regular bench contributors. You're seeing other players have to step up in bigger roles, but yet this bench not only is being productive, but in the unique way of being a unit that has been consistently productive on both ends of the court. That is what's making the difference. So not only are you getting the Grizzlies starting lineup on a night-in, night-out basis doing better than their opponent's starting lineup, but you're having this bench either match the production of other bench units or do better than them. And that's how the Grizzlies are not only getting victories, but consistently are being able to blow out other teams because their starting lineup, the Grizzlies starting lineup, due to its defense and the consistency of Dillon, Desmond, and Jaren, they're beating the opponent's starting lineups while the Grizzlies bench is also remaining a positive as well. But last night, Jaren Jackson Jr. stood out once again, both on the defensive end, multiple blocks, as well as on the offensive end. But a key thing about his performance last night, if you want an example of how Jaren is different now than he was even a month ago, is last night. 1 of 6 from 3, but overall 8 of 17 on the night. He was 7 of 11 on 2-point shots because of his ability, once again, to show how much he's improved as a self-creator, show how much smarter he is at getting his own shot, knowing when to take his shot. Last night was a perfect example. Last night, if this would have been in the first 10 games of the season, Jaren Jackson Jr. probably would have been, 4 of 14, probably would have been a bit of a non-factor on offense. But because of the fact that he has found his groove when it comes to getting into the rim, he's found his offensive balance, you see a night where he struggles from 3 not turn into a disappointing offensive night because of how productive he is inside the arc. But the story of the night on offense was Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks last night looked like the Dillon Brooks that we saw in the playoffs. Again, I don't think any of us really ever expected for the Dillon Brooks that we saw in the playoffs against the Utah Jazz to be who Dillon Brooks would be consistently on offense going forward. If that was the case, you'd be talking about Dillon Brooks potentially being an all-star or playing at an all-star level this year. But last night, 60% from the field, 26 points. Only the second time that Dillon Brooks has had 25 points in back-to-back games in his career. And it's been at a time where it's been needed. With how shorthanded the Grizzlies were this past Saturday night against the Rockets, it made all the difference in the world. And then last night, with Tyrese Maxey, who's an outstanding talent, having a great year for the 76ers, Dillon matched him point for point to negate the impact that Tyrese Maxey had, and then the rest of the Grizzlies roster significantly outperformed the rest of the 76ers roster. So Dillon stepping up and being a source of scoring like he has over the past 2 games, it could not have come at a better time, and he also has established himself a new peak when it comes to scoring in his career. But beyond the offense and beyond how well Dillon played, beyond Jaren Jackson Jr. being back in the lineup and ho-hum continuing how well he has played, the Grizzlies set a new franchise record for consecutive games with 10 or more steals. They now have had 8 straight games, all without Ja Morant, in which they've had 10 or more steals in each game. And I want to point out that it's not just obviously that it's been rare in Grizzlies franchise history that this has occurred, but the Grizzlies are the only team since over the past 5 years that have had 2 stretches in which they've had 7 or more games now with 10 plus steals. Plus, since the year 2000, this is only the 8th time in the NBA that a team in general has had 8 or more games of 10 plus steals. What the Grizzlies are doing is not just, hey, them playing good defense or, hey, them, playing to their strengths. They're doing something rare. You do not see NBA teams regularly have this much success, number one, forcing turnovers, but also having those turnovers lead to points like the Grizzlies are doing right now. And it's making all the difference in the world. So not only does Dillon set a bit of personal history, but the Grizzlies set a new franchise mark, and every bit of it has been needed. This just goes to show how every bit of both on an individual level and on a team level, every bit of the effort that the Grizzlies are putting forth is needed for them to be able to win at the rate that they are without Ja Morant. But the fact that they're doing it game in and game out shows that it's becoming the norm, shows that this Grizzlies roster, this Grizzlies franchise is stabilizing into the sustainable winner we all hoped they can show the capability of doing this year, and it's doing it right before our eyes. But while many individual players certainly have stood out, Desmond, Dillon, Jaren, Tyus, Steven Adams, what have you, one player also, kind of quietly, has really helped out the Grizzlies, especially off the bench, continue their consistency and success. His name's De'Anthony Melton, and he definitely has found his groove once again when it comes to December. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we do that, do want to certainly talk about Truebill, because Truebill is a great option for anyone who wants the ability to be able to use an option that can allow for you to manage your free trials. Listen, we all run into situations where when it comes to, especially around the holiday season, we run into ads, we run into promotions that we want to try out. We want the ability to be able to try out these free ads because we want to get an idea of what a product is, but we don't want them to run into subscriptions or run into hidden costs. Well, that a lot of times is what happens with those free ads. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill. Because company makes subscriptions hard to cancel, Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Another really cool opportunity, another really cool entity that I want to tell you about is Stance. Founded in 2009, Stance Apparel represents a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, and active apparel. With a sharp focus on comfort, quality, and creativity, Stance brings an atypical aesthetic alongside some of pop culture's hottest collaborators for the ultimate in style and self-expression. Because everything you wear should be a direct extension of who you are and how you feel. And the great thing about it is that there's so many designs that you could choose from when it comes to Stance, but also how comfortable a fabric that it is. It truly is a great combination of both style and comfort. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in, that those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off of your first purchase. Use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a less ordinary life with Stance. Again, I want to remind you that Locked On Grizzlies, hopefully, is always your first listen of the day. And if it is, thank you so much for making that the case. If you're a new listener, welcome. Hello. If you're a loyal listener who's been along for the ride for a while, thank you so much for your support. But after making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day, check out the Locked On NBA podcast as your second listen of the day. Listen, we're going to talk about it this week. The December 15th deadline of when more players in the NBA can be eligible for trades, that's coming up. How could it impact the Grizzlies? How could it impact the NBA? Check out the Locked On NBA podcast, free, where you get your podcast, and also here on YouTube as well. So De'Anthony Melton is certainly someone that coming into this season, he was one of the bigger storylines when it came to what impact he could have on the Grizzlies, and an impact in a more featured role when it came to Grayson Allen being traded to Milwaukee, and both him and Desmond Bane going into more featured roles. And clearly, De'Anthony Melton, coming off the year that he had in the 2020-2021 season, he had earned every bit. There had been every reason for De'Anthony Melton to get a bigger role. And starting off this season, it certainly seemed like that De'Anthony Melton was going to succeed in that role. Starting next to Desmond Bane, without Dillon Brooks being in the lineup, Desmond and De'Anthony did a great job of playing off each other and being able to produce in a positive light. But as time went on, Dillon came back. Desmond Bane, he obviously took off. There is clear reason as to why Desmond Bane should be in the most improved conversation when it comes to the NBA. But De'Anthony Melton, he fell off a bit. For instance, in the month of November, De'Anthony Melton shot 35.9% from the field, 29.6% from three, a 45.6 true shooting percentage. Overall, he certainly ran into a bit of a slump, especially as he ran into more minutes starting, just ran into some offensive struggles. Both he and Desmond Bane both ran into a bit of struggles early in November. But De'Anthony Melton has certainly picked it back up in 6 games in the month of December. He now is shooting 48% from the field. He's shooting coming into tonight, shooting 48% from the field, 35.5% from three, with a true shooting percentage of 58.6%. And tonight, for instance, he made all the difference in the world once again. 15 points, 4 assists, and 2 of 6 from three on the evening. So the thing about De'Anthony Melton is that we all know the impact that De'Anthony Melton makes. This calendar year, we've seen that elevate a bit more with him turning into a true two-way impact. Last year, his overall ability in terms of creating his own shot from three, finding his shot from three, being able to create his own shot off the dribble, his ball handling, shot creation, overall offensive prowess certainly improved. This year has proven, and in the second half of last year, towards the probably first 2/3 of last year, you don't know if De'Anthony Melton's going to be a consistent 40% shooter from three over a long stretch of the season. Last year may have just simply been a bit of a fluke, a bit of an outlier. But once again, he's now shooting right around 35% from three. So De'Anthony Melton is a 35 to 38% three-point shooter, is certainly something that seems to be sustainable. But the thing is that if you add that to what he is as a defender, again, showing unbelievable prowess in terms of creating turnovers, showing that he can be an above-average rebounder on the perimeter, showing that he could be, as a guard, a very good production of blocks. The all-around game of De'Anthony Melton may not be what it was in the first, 2/3 of last year. He may have fallen off a bit, but this December does reveal something about De'Anthony Melton. It once again, in my opinion, proves that his ultimate usage, the ultimate role for De'Anthony Melton, is a very versatile option off the bench. And the reason why that is because I just simply think that De'Anthony Melton, kind of like Brandon Clark, I feel like while they certainly are very skilled players and can be two-way difference makers at times, you're likely going to see them create far more of an advantage against second units or off the bench than you would be them as consistent starters. You always want to get the most out of your players. You always want to test your players to see if they can continue to remain as productive as they have been in smaller roles, in bigger roles, and against better talent. And the thing is that Brandon Clark and De'Anthony Melton certainly have shown that they can be productive at times against opponents' teams, against the opposing team's best talents. But I truly feel that what we've seen since Thanksgiving, with De'Anthony Melton getting back on track when it comes to his offensive game to support his defensive impact, I feel like that we're seeing the sixth man of the year level type play of De'Anthony Melton. I talked about it all offseason. I talked about it how I felt that the Grizzlies truly could have a surprise candidate for sixth man of the year. And we've seen it stretches. It's been Brandon Clark potentially playing at that level, maybe not sixth man of the year, but being highly productive before he unfortunately ran into an injury. We've seen Kyle Anderson over the past two games, and there was a stretch in early November where he was playing really well. But at the end of the day, I know that everyone wants for De'Anthony Melton to have as big a role as possible with how productive he is on a permanent production, how much of a difference he makes. But with the emergence of Desmond Bane, with the two-way production of Dillon Brooks, how important Dillon Brooks is to the defense, and obviously Ja Morant, you just don't have starting positions available for De'Anthony Melton. He's not going to start over Ja, Desmond, or Dillon anytime soon. That's just the truth. All three of those players are playing at a higher level consistently than De'Anthony Melton. That's nothing negative against Melton. It's just true. And they're doing it against better talent, which is fine. You want that development to be there if you're with the Grizzlies fan, what have you. You want Ja, Desmond, and Dillon to be as successful as possible in starting lineup roles, because that means that they're being difference makers against the opposing team's best talents. Just because that may not be the same truth about De'Anthony Melton on a consistent basis as it is Ja, Desmond, and Dillon, that doesn't mean that De'Anthony Melton cannot be advantageous. As a matter of fact, if you've got Ja, Desmond, and Dillon being advantages in the starting lineup, that just frees up De'Anthony Melton to be one of the best bench advantages in the league when you compare him to the rest of the NBA. And he's showing that in the month of December. So we're once again seeing De'Anthony Melton start to make the impact, start to pick up his production, the De'Anthony Melton that we saw last year, that so many clamored for having a bigger, more featured role. And in time, he's going to have that some nights, and he's not going to have that some nights. But the key for De'Anthony Melton is finding the role where he can consistently create advantages through how productive he can be on both ends of the court. And I clearly think that we are seeing that the best role for him to do that is as that sixth man off the bench. Because right now, I don't think he's going to win the Sixth Man of the Year award, but right now, De'Anthony Melton, with his numbers in the month of December, he's playing at a level that if he put it out over a full season, if he put a full season together of these type of numbers, he would be in that Sixth Man of the Year conversation. So though he's not going to do it over a full season, who cares? He's doing it right now. And he should continue to do it once the Grizzlies get some of their better talents like Ja, Brandon, and others back. De'Anthony Melton will still be in that supporting role as the sixth or seventh man off the bench. And if he can continue this production, it will allow for the Grizzlies bench, especially with Tyus coming back to it, it will allow for this Grizzlies bench to remain an advantage overall. And that, with De'Anthony Melton's play and the impact that it will have on the bench overall as an overall unit, that could be one of the biggest contributing factors to the Grizzlies maintaining the success that they're seeing right now once they get Ja Morant and others back. But a big thing above all, overall, when it comes to 7 out of 8 victories, the overall play of De'Anthony Melton and others off the bench is the fact that Desmond, Dillon, and Jaren, 2 of those 3 delivering on a nightly basis, 40 to 50 points. The defense playing like a top 5 unit, and the Grizzlies bench performing like one of the better units, or at least a unit that could produce positive results no matter who they're playing on a nightly basis. Those 3 steps to victory are becoming consistent for the Grizzlies. And that's a big development as the Grizzlies are now going to run into a very tough part of their schedule during the holiday season. And as we get into the new year, we'll discuss that in just a moment. So it's obvious, as I had mentioned, with De'Anthony Melton's play in the month of December, he's been a clear boost to the Grizzlies' overall performance. Well, let's talk about Boost itself. You listen to podcasts for the power of knowledge. You should switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money. Get 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line and a free 5G phone when you switch, so you can get the latest episodes, all on one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save. Boost Mobile. Free phone limited to new customers and 1 per line. Additional restrictions apply. Offers coverage not available everywhere or on all phones or networks. See boost.com, boostmobile.com for details. On tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, I'm going to discuss how, once again, yes, we know that Desmond Bane has been absolutely wonderful so far this year, but Killian Tilly and Xavier Tillman are starting to once again show their skill as players. How the Grizzlies overall having, in my opinion, the best 2020 draft class in the NBA a year later, in a draft that certainly has exceeded expectations. How the success the Grizzlies had on that draft night is not only benefiting them on the court now, but also could benefit them in terms of off-the-court decisions when it comes to potential trades and other moves in the near future. That, and also previewing the game against the Portland Trail Blazers on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. And that's where I want to shift the focus, because the Grizzlies now are standing at 17-11, and they clearly are in a good position when it comes to that 4th spot in the West. While the Grizzlies right now have a 1.5 game lead on the Los Angeles Clippers when it comes to the 4th spot in the West, to me, even more important is the fact that the Grizzlies have a 2.5 game lead on being in the top 6 of the Western Conference, as well as a 2.5 game lead in the Southwest Division. But it clearly has benefited the Grizzlies with how well they have played without Ja Morant, with the fact that they've won 7 out of 8 games. And again, we're seeing the Grizzlies be consistent with how they are winning their games. Well, over the next 10 days, the Grizzlies, I feel, are going to have to continue trying to get as many wins as possible, because beyond that, their schedule becomes extremely tough. And here's what I mean by that. Obviously, on Wednesday, the Grizzlies will be going out west to start a 2-game swing. On Wednesday, they'll be playing the Portland Trail Blazers. After that, they'll be playing the Sacramento Kings. And then on Sunday, December the 19th, the Grizzlies will come back to the FedEx Forum, and they'll play the Portland Trail Blazers and then the Oklahoma City Thunder. So you've got 3 games over the next week. The Trail Blazers twice, the Kings and the Thunder. where you have to feel that the Grizzlies right now, when you look at those three teams, the Grizzlies will be playing a total of 4 times. You have to feel confident the Grizzlies are the team right now that is playing the best among those opponents over the next 4 games. So the Grizzlies being able to win 3 out of those next 4 games would put them at a record of 20-12. And that would be huge, a third of the way through the season, and allowing for the Grizzlies to have some breathing room in terms of being above a play-in spot in the playoffs. And here's the reason why that is so important. Because if by next Monday, the Grizzlies can be 20-12, even 19-13, that is going to be a very good position to operate from, because for the rest of the year, as we get through the Christmas holiday going into the new year, the Grizzlies will play the Warriors, they'll play the Kings once again, but then the Suns, the Lakers, the Spurs, but following that, the Nets and the Cavaliers. So over the next 4 games, the Grizzlies play the Trailblazers twice, the Sacramento Kings, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. 3 teams over the next 4 games that you have to feel are either at the Grizzlies' level of talent right now or below them. But after that 4-game stretch, the next 7 games include the Warriors, the Suns, the Lakers, the Cavaliers, and the Nets. 5 teams right now in that 7-game stretch that arguably are among the 10 best, or, arguably not necessarily the 10 best teams in the NBA, but clearly are at the Grizzlies' talent level or above. And then that is to end December. We're not even talking about to end January. We're over in a certain stretch of games. The Grizzlies will be playing the Mavericks, the Bulls, the Bucks, the Nuggets, the Mavericks again, the Jazz once again, the Wizards, and the 76ers. That's to end the month of January. So over the next 6 weeks through the end of January, the Grizzlies have a couple of 2-week stretches where they're going to be playing a very tough slate of opponents. So it's going to continue to be very important for, just like the Grizzlies are doing right now, they're consistently beating teams that they should beat. They're going to have to do that to be able to weather the storm that's going to come as the Grizzlies go through a very tough stretch to end the month of December, but also a very tough stretch to end the month of January. And you hope by that time, you hope maybe over the next 10 days or so, you get Ja Morant back, you get Brandon Clark back, and you're able to acclimate them to how several of the Grizzlies players are playing right now. But the Grizzlies are clearly taking care of business, but the fact that they are becomes even more important when you consider not only that the Grizzlies are going to have over the next 2 months 2 very tough parts of their schedule at the end of December and then at the end of January, but once the end of January comes around, you also start a 2-month stretch from the end of January through the end of March, where the Grizzlies are going to be playing about 65% of their games on the road. So it's not saying that the Grizzlies' schedule is going to be hard moving forward. As a matter of fact, I think that the strength of their schedule is in the bottom third of the league. They're going to be able to manage it. But every single win, them being able right now, in a more than manageable part of their schedule, even without Ja Morant, every win that they gain right now, due to how well they're playing, gives them breathing room when they're eventually likely going to run into some type of skid, just simply because they're going to be playing talented teams back to back to back. And so you also have the fact that not only are the Grizzlies getting the wins now, but they're building confidence. As I mentioned, those 3 points, 2 of the 3 of Desmond, Dillon, and Jaren, stepping up and combining for 40 to 50 points a night, plus a top 5 defense overall, night in and night out, plus a Grizzlies bench that continues to be productive both offensively and defensively every single night. That is the recipe for success for the Grizzlies. It builds confidence on this roster of being able to do it no matter who they're playing. They did it against LeBron James and Anthony Davis on Thursday night. They did it against Oklahoma City in setting the record for the biggest win in franchise history. And then they did it against the Houston Rockets, who in the previous 2 weeks had come into the game on Saturday night, being a top 3 team shooting the 3 and defending the 3. The Grizzlies' recipe to success, those 3 points, it's shown to be successful no matter who they played. And though they haven't played several of the top 7 or 8 teams in the NBA like they're going to play over the next 6 weeks, every game that the Grizzlies build up the confidence of knowing how to win basketball games on both ends of the court using from 1 to 10 on their roster, that puts them in a better position to be able to do the same thing against the NBA's best. And if we could add Ja Morant back to this equation that's consistently leading to wins, that should even strengthen our position more once we get into the tough parts of these schedules. So overall, another impressive victory for the Grizzlies. Great to see Dillon putting together a couple of good performances offensively. Great to see the bench producing like it has. And kudos to the Grizzlies defense setting franchise history. A very deserved acknowledgement for this Grizzlies team with how well they've played with their 8th straight game of 10 or more steals. It's going to be a lot of fun to certainly continue to see this team play. But over the next week, if the Grizzlies can get 2 or 3 or more wins, it'll really put them in a good position as they go into a very tough stretch of games to end this year and then going into next year as well. Don't forget, you can find myself at Stats SEC, the show at Locked On Grizz. You can find the podcast wherever it's available: Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the Odyssey app. Check us out here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button below. That lets us know that you enjoy the show and lets others who enjoy Grizzlies content find the show as well. Until next time, we'll talk to you again soon tomorrow, discussing the overall impressive impact of the Grizzlies 2020 draft class and how it's benefiting the Grizzlies now and into the future in multiple ways, and previewing the game as the Grizzlies head out to Portland to face a very fun rival over the past few years in the Portland Trailblazers. That and much more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. We'll talk to you then. Have a great night.